So I'm watching this. Let's see. Let me shrink that. Okay. Dan, my mod, says, yes, it does say that. No, it does not say that to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. Do you want to be accurate with the text? It could mean that. It could mean that. But it doesn't say that explicitly. It could mean that. It could mean, like I said, just like I said, if you eat cake and you say somebody gets fat when they eat cake, oh, I want to get fat, so I'm going to eat fatty food. Let's say you want to get fat. When I eat my cake, I'm going to get fat. Does that have to mean that I'm going to instantly become a blimp as I finish eating my cake or while I'm eating my cake? No, it does not. I can long to be fat and then state that after I eat my cake, I'm going to get fat. That's true. That doesn't necessitate that I'm instantly fat the moment I eat the cake. That's the point. I'm throwing you a bone. I'm just saying, be precise. It doesn't say to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. It doesn't say that. Why are you changing it to say something it doesn't say specifically? Because it's the only text you have that makes that confuses this matter. And then you can look at the context. It's actually pretty obvious. What is he talking about? He's talking about this body and the resurrection body. Not to be naked, but we want to be clothed. Not that we'll be found naked or unclothed. So there's a building from God, from heaven. If so, be that being clothed, we shall not be found naked. For when we're in this tabernacle, being burdened, not for that we would be unclothed. Again, be unclothed. He's saying, not that I'm wanting to be unclothed. And the fact that they speak about the spirit, which is separate from the body. I'm not denying that there's a spirit aspect and a body aspect of the living person. He's thinking about God's breath that made man alive, and that bodies are dead when the spirit leaves it. Yes, he thinks that way. So do I. I don't deny that. You got to ask yourself, what are you demanding the text says? And what does the text actually say? And because even if I think about it wrong or not like Paul, that doesn't mean I'm wrong about what he's talking about here, what he's saying here regarding the new body. It doesn't say absent from the body is present with the Lord. He prefers to be present with the Lord. He would rather not be here in this mortal body, but rather I'd prefer to be with the Lord. But he teaches about when he's going to be with the Lord, which is what I demonstrated in the video. Just like whether in the body or out of the body, I don't know. That doesn't prove your conscious intermediate state either. It means Paul doesn't know if he literally went to heaven bodily, like Enoch and Elijah or Moses or Jesus, or if he went there in a vision or in the spirit. If you go to heaven in the spirit, does that automatically mean your spirit breath went to heaven? No, it doesn't. It's he doesn't know. How could he not know? Why? Apparently Paul doesn't know, but God and everybody else knows. But Paul didn't know. But you're getting your doctrine from Paul. But he didn't know. God knows, he says. It's interesting that you think you know, even though Paul says he doesn't. He doesn't exactly get it. But you know what he does know? He knows that his Hebrew Bible, which is what his Bible was when he was preaching and recording when the scriptures were being recorded, it's pretty much entirely all he had. Do you think he got new revelation, or do you think he just went off the Old Testament Hebrew scriptures? I'll tell you what he's going off of. You know when he talks about the seed being planted? Let's look at that. I'm going to take a look at that. Okay. I know Paul was thinking of Job 14 and 19 when he was writing about the resurrection. Listen to this. This is interesting. Man that is born of a woman is of few days and full of trouble. What do you mean? Few days? Does that mean He doesn't keep on having days after he dies. He cometh forth like a flower and is cut down. Wink, wink. He fleeth also as a shadow and continueth not. Well, yeah, his body doesn't continue, but his spirit is immortal. I thought Jesus bought us immortality by his resurrection, but whatever. Seeing his days are determined, the number of his months are with thee. Thou hast appointed his bounds that he cannot pass. Oh, his months and days come to an end. Was the Hebrew Bible wrong? Did we always have immortal souls? Where did it work? The root thereof wax old in the earth, and the stalk thereof die in the ground. For there is hope of a tree, if it be cut down, that it will sprout again, that the tender branch thereof will not cease. Yet through the scent of water it will bud and bring forth boughs like a plant. He knows, like, okay, he doesn't even probably even, it's like he's longing for something like a resurrection, but he knows death is real. Is he wrong? Was he wrong? Is the Hebrew wrong in the entire Hebrew Bible? Is it wrong when it knows nothing but the hope of a resurrection? And then the New Testament fulfills it by giving us a resurrection through Christ, who didn't go to heaven until he rose from the dead bodily. Jesus didn't go to heaven without his body. He went down. Was Job wrong? Oh, poor Job, he was lamenting, but it was never true. Oh, really? So our souls had immortality before Jesus won. So I guess Jesus did just come in the body, because that's all he really needed to redeem. He was probably just an avatar, because he just had to redeem the body, not the whole person. Because the spirit side of the person already went to heaven, even though it says you're of the dust, and the breath returns to God who gave it. Into your hands I commit my spirit. What does that mean? It means you trust God. He can bring you back to life. Where do you think they got the sleep analogy from? Many who sleep in the dust will awake. Apparently they who sleep in the dust awake from the dust at the resurrection. Oh, they were just kind of confused. They thought the body, it's really just the body, but the spirit, that's Plato. That's Hellenistic Hellenistic Greek influence. They didn't defy their Hebrew scriptures. Where's the text that says they got a new revelation about what's really true and not the Bible? People are supposed to be Protestants. It's okay to realize Job didn't realize everything, but God's setting up this lament of humans because they know death is real. And they have hope, like God will do something about it. And then there's hints at it in the text, the Old Testament, and kind of prophetic language. Job is right about death and lamenting about the reality of death. And in his words and in his hopes are God and his righteous judgment, which God ends up saying, yep, look what I've done in the New Testament. But to say Job was just plain wrong is to totally miss it, just totally miss the scriptures and the beauty of it. That death is actually real, like God said. Somebody said, you shall not surely die. Who said that? God said you will die as a punishment for sin. Did he really just mean the body? This is so outrageously stupid. It just cuts the Bible off at its knees. It's so much more just beautiful when you see the death, for the truth of death and what Jesus does. They didn't know how to talk about in between, other than that they know God will be the righteous judge, and their people are held in store for different outcomes, because God is righteous and just and loving. They're crying out, surely God has to fix this mess, because after death Man fades away. But he's like, there's like a hope that God will vindicate the righteous, redeem them, like in Job 19. I know my Redeemer lives in it. Like, he wishes that someone would remember his cause, that he was persecuted, if you will, by Satan. And he knows God is righteous, and he's begging to see God in his body, not someone else's, but his own eye, his own flesh. I will see God. It's like he's lamenting, but it ends up being a promise through the New Testament and the resurrection from the dead. The problem with 2 Corinthians 5, when people start forcing that to be, this is where corrupt doctrine just saturates into the church. Once you say it's not, one thing has to mean that, now you've totally made a certain criteria. And so like the Bible's not clear anymore. The context is contrasting the heavenly body that comes from heaven. And he says 3 different times in 3 different ways. He's not talking about being unclothed. He's looking forward to the what? The promise that Jesus gave to the apostles in John 14. Where I'm going, which I established in my last video about this topic, where he's going in the context is to his Father's house, to the Father, from leaving this world to his Father. There's stops along the way like Calvary and Sheol or Hades, and and then on the earth before he ascends. But his ultimate, the context is in the beginning of chapter 13. He's leaving this world to return to his Father. When he makes his promise about returning in John 14, he says, in my Father's house are many mansions. After he's just done a discourse on they'll know the way to heaven, quote unquote, because he is the way, the truth, and the life, following after him, being his disciples. That's the way to heaven. But that has nothing to do with literal flying to heaven as a Casper ghost. That's paganism. It's paganism. It's permeated in the church. It's Plato, and it was the Gnostics and the early church. Do you believe the Bible? Does the Old Testament get stuff wrong? It's not that the spirits don't exist. It's that they're held in Shadowland, if you will. They're barely there. They're barely sustaining. But they're not in heaven. Even the early church fathers, who were just plagued with their Platonic, dualist, Hellenistic ideas, seem to understand that, or seem to believe for the most part, that you don't even go to heaven when you die after the cross, because that's when the early church fathers obviously were writing. They all said, and it's like, I think Protestants were afraid to like tackle this issue because of their coming out of the Roman Church and the purgatory issue. It kind of looked like purgatory, so they didn't want to get into it. I don't know, or they just didn't get around to it. But Luther didn't believe in an immortal soul. Jesus grants immortality. Don't turn verses that talk about the person and then say dualism is true, and then when the text talks of the person, it's just talking of their body. That makes the Bible, you're turning the Bible into being ignorant. You're making the Bible like, well, they're kind of confused. That's just talking about the body. No, it says the person. And if dualism is true, the person would be the spirit, the spiritual side of them that's immortal. But it doesn't talk that way. It talks about the person. Because the person is an embodied, living, breathing creature that God made. Paul is not correcting the Old Testament. We die, and that stings, and it will until the adoption. Dead people aren't alive. If a man dies, will he live again? That's the question. Does that sound like dead people are alive? No, it doesn't. It makes no sense. So then you're saying Job is wrong if you don't agree with me. Job, well, he's confused. Well, yeah, let's just turn every text into saying they didn't know what they're talking about, because God didn't inspire it after all, because Jesus hadn't come yet. It's amazing. Messes up so much doctrine. The Lord will bring with him Yes, back to heaven when he delivers up for the marriage supper of the Lamb in his Father's house. It's a Jewish wedding. That's why he has to come back. Where I'm going, you can't come. But don't worry, I'll come back for you. What is the blessed hope? It's not going to heaven when you die. The Bible knows nothing about that. There's no text that says that. Not a single text. The last bastion is a misread 2 Corinthians 5, where Paul literally says, I'm not going to be naked 3 times. That's not what our hope is. So obviously, if the context says 3 different ways, not to be unclothed, not that we'd be naked, but that we'd receive our tabernacle from heaven. Well, Jesus comes from heaven when he comes back for his bride. So Jesus said you can't go where he's going, but yet later on he says he's coming back to take us to the Father's house. So where I am, there you may be also. Where is it that he's going to be? In his Father's house. That's what the discourse starts with, or that part of it, the beginning of chapter 14. Peter could have gone. Like Peter says, where are you going? You're not going to leave. I'll go with you. And he says, you're going to deny me 3 times. But that clearly shows that Jesus wasn't saying you're just not going to go to your death with me. Peter was willing to go to his death for Jesus when Jesus was with him. He cuts off that soldier's ear when they try to arrest Jesus. Jesus is like, back off, dude. Get behind me, Satan. Don't. This is what I've come to do. Peter would have fought to the death and gone to the death with Jesus next by his side. That's another reason to realize the ultimate context is Jesus, and it gives it to you the context in the beginning of chapter 13 of John. It literally starts off the context. And Jesus, when he knew his hour had come and that he would be leaving the world to his Father, that's what it says. Read John 13 carefully through John 14 and then ask yourself, what is Jesus talking about when he says you can't go where I'm going? It gets a little confusing because he's like, but you know the way. Jesus doesn't sneak the virgin bride before the consummation day, before the house is ready, before the time has come and he's prepared it. He's doing a work from heaven in the lives of the believer. And he will not return until everything's done, until the fullness of the Gentiles comes in, until it's the right time to destroy the Antichrist, until his saints are ready, his remnant is ready, demonstrating whatever it is God is wanting to demonstrate by proving his people and allowing evil and the mark of the beast. Then he comes to stop the time of trouble.